March 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic spread across the world.
Good evening. As we come on the air in the West tonight, President Trump addressing the American people just a short time ago as the toll of the coronavirus widens here in the U.S. The president's words come after the World Health Organization today declared the coronavirus a global pandemic, citing the alarming levels of spread, but also the alarming levels of inaction in their words.
Along the way, this virus killed hundreds of thousands and affected the economies, political systems, environments, and everyday lives of the countries it spread to.
Our schools, all 6 million students, have been in distance learning since March.
The majority of American public students are now well into a virtual school year, and data from around the country is starting to show that middle and high school students are falling behind.
The pandemic has only broadened the inequities that already exist between students. With so many now at home without computers or internet service, educators fear that as many as a quarter of them are not engaged in school at all.
One of the biggest districts in the country reported an 83% jump in middle and high schoolers earning Fs this year compared to last year.
So we look to our community for their help to find out what it is like in education in the time of a pandemic.
During school, I think I was way better in person. I know I was way better in person. But after, because I'm more of a hands-on learner and like up close and writing, whereas doing everything on the computer is kind of like not my thing. Like it's difficult. Sometimes I have Wi-Fi problems or tech issues, and it's crazy. It has a huge effect. It's very different, and I'm not used to working on computers.
I think I haven't really been able to, really get out there with people that I would maybe normally hang out with. I have my little group of people that I have to keep, in touch with like that, because it's kind of dangerous to go out and, go to every party you see, go to everybody's person's house you see.
I can definitely say there's been some challenges with both of us as far as working from home and doing school from home every day. It definitely can present some challenges with focus. Right. There may be some extra noise in the house when I'm on a conference call or he's doing a virtual class. So that takes some adjusting, as well as other people working inside the house certain days. So we definitely have been adjusting to having separate spaces during this work from home situation. I definitely think if working from home every day, doing virtual learning, it presents some challenges with focus. So I do think that he may be a stronger student when he's in person, and he can have that in-person interaction with the teachers and other students.
I used to play sports in school, and now I'm lacking that because of virtual learning, and my parents don't want me to go to actual school because we're cautious about COVID. So I don't have interest in that anymore. And it's just like, I don't know how to explain it, but I don't have the same interest in things I had before. I used to do cooking class, drama, and just participate in after school activities and all that type of stuff. I did, I was the vice president of my school and things like that.
Many students in the St. Louis schools have stories just like Mia's. In fact, thousands of parents have pulled their students out of the Missouri school system because they were not satisfied with the virtual learning, nor did they feel safe with sending their children to an in-person classroom.
Definitely COVID has disrupted what we do every day, which is work with children. Of course, we were unable to go to school for over 8 months. And so we lost those personal and relationship connections that we have to our students. We also saw significant economic impact due to job loss. heightened food insecurity. And overall, I would say that our students that are struggling the most are those that are the most vulnerable. And so we have that gap of academic progression that was there pre-COVID. It's even more profound now. I also feel that COVID just amplified many of the inequities that we see in our systems that support schools from a housing perspective, from a economic perspective, from an educational perspective, and healthcare also perspective. And so significant impact, and has made the work even more challenging.
In the beginning, it wasn't that bad because I still went into the building and I would just teach on my smartboard. And that was fun because I had a healthy amount of like separation between home life and work life. But whenever I stopped going into the building, and I stopped going in because it was just like an exposure thing, and I felt like maybe it'd be safer to be home. I have roommates, and they were like, well, if you can teach from home, then you should teach from home. So I started teaching from home, and your days just blend, and you don't stop working because it never feels like you're leaving a workspace.
One of the main difficulties that I've been experiencing is not like an inability to build relationships, but there's been severe barriers to doing so. Particularly with like giving students one-on-one attention, having opportunities to interact with them, like as you know, during a passing period, or as it comes to learning more about them. It's been tough. And I'm a very like relationship driven person. I consider myself very animated, especially in my teaching style. And it can be really hard when I am just in my office and looking at my screen and there's just a bunch of black screens. Like they turn their cameras off. I don't see anyone. And I'll be like, hey guys, like, how's it going? Crickets. It can be hard. It can be hard. And like some days are fantastic and we get a lot of like interaction, but sometimes it can be really hard, especially in math, because sometimes math can be a little dry. Also been the case when it comes to building relationships with my administration or fellow teachers, and that we have the option to go in the building, but almost nobody does. And I did for the first couple months and just worked in my classroom, but didn't really have a chance to engage with my peers. So I think a sentiment that I've experienced heavily has been one of like isolation. But
well, we have to change a lot of things. First of all, I'm working in a compulsory school. So our kids have a lot of social, emotional, and economic situation. So we need to understand that now that a lot of people are losing their job and everything. So I noticed that sometimes they are kind of quiet, they don't answer. So we need to have a lot of interactive lessons. And at the same time, we have to make sure that we cover the standards that we're supposed to be covering. So it's a lot of changing. I understand that some of them don't have a steady house where they need to stay, because sometimes they have a lot of family with COVID and they need to move to another place. So that situation is very bad, but at the same time, we try to make sure that sometimes we provide an environment where they feel like they don't have to think about all of the things that is happening right now in the United States. It's very challenging. And sometimes we don't receive the homework on time, and our kids were not prepared for that. So we need to start from the beginning, like how to attach document, how to submit document, and how they log in. So we were very behind in technology. So I guess that's another thing that is very difficult for them. The changing was unbelievable.
Question. So fundamentally, we have always in U City had a focus on what we call humanizing the educational experience for our children. And so we have really leaned into that. We have provided grace when it comes to how we are supporting students at our high school level. So extending our semester to afford more time, having the final exam
be more of a summative exam so that the unadded stressors and pressures are not put on students. We've also made the decision to um, look at having both options for our students, having an in-person option as well as a virtual option. Many of our families are simply afraid to send their children to school, and so we've had to make some accommodations for that. We've also provided a number of social services support. So we serve meals every week. We provide 7 meals to all of our families who want to receive those meals. To date, we've served almost 700,000 meals since March, and we're a small district, so that number is significant. We've also worked to connect our families to social services, whether that be counseling services, therapeutic services, really just to meet their needs. And so we really just wrapped our arms around the University City community and particularly our families to really just get them whatever they need. So those are some of the, I wouldn't say changes, but those are the things that I see us doing at more of a heightened level.
Many of schools and organizations have provided resources like food and water to the St. Louis community. Since the start of the pandemic, the St. Louis Food Bank alone has provided over 49 million meals since March 2020.
Let's see how the students been feeling. It's actually a mixed bag. So a lot of my little assignments or forms that they'll fill out, there will always be questions about how they're doing, or is there anything that you need me to know, or anything you want to discuss? Do you want to schedule a meeting? Talk to me about something. A lot of feedback is around the question, do you want to come back in person? Is half of them will say no, I'm having the time of my life. I get my work done early. I'm doing well. I don't want this to change. I'm I love living with my family. Things are going great. Another half of them are saying I cannot wait to go back to school. And that's for a number of reasons.
One is a really, I think, key detail that I think is really messed up. So let's say you're a student and you get a laptop, and you have the laptop, you have a hotspot, maybe even two, because the district's providing hotspots as well, but they're limited. They're in limited supply, so not everyone gets a hotspot. But let's say you have both. And a month in, you're walking down the steps of your house and you drop the laptop and it breaks. What you have to do to get it fixed is you have to go to a tech support center that aren't clearly identified in the district. They have a bunch of sites. Vashon's one of them. I know this now, but I didn't know in the beginning, and teachers didn't know at all. So I had to figure out where the tech support sites were, tell the student, hey, you have to go to that, if I can even communicate with them, because if they don't have their laptop, often they don't know how to reach me. So let's say I randomly get a hold of a parent, and they're like, oh yeah, the laptop's broken, right? It's been broken for a week, and I haven't seen that student in a week, so they're missing out on learning. And they're like, I don't know what to do. And I was like, oh, well, I don't know what to do either. The district would ask that they set up a payment plan and that they use either a check or cash. So you couldn't use a credit card or a debit card for some reason. I think there's just mistrust between families and the district. So because of that mistrust, they don't allow you to use a credit card. And that's so messed up to me, because whenever I think of what credit's used for, it's for people to spend beyond their means in extreme circumstances. Like a line of credit's meant to support you whenever you're in need, and they're not able to use it. So that was awful. And so they needed cash or a check in order for them to create a payment plan to get a new laptop or to get their laptop fixed. And there's multiple students that would run into that and miss a whole month of school, or a couple weeks. So
breathe and give yourself some grace. First, I think that self-care is very important, and know that today is today, and if we're blessed to see it, tomorrow is tomorrow, and today will be in the past. So how do we take the lessons learned and use them, no matter how difficult they are, how painful these circumstances may be? How can we use those lessons to move us forward? But first, we have to just pause for a moment and just breathe. We get so caught up in the busyness of everything you just described. And particularly now, one thing that I've learned, I am comfortable with change. I don't have predictions about my day. Of course you plan, but I'm prepared to erase those plans on a dime, and that's okay. And so that's what I would say. But tomorrow is promising. And as someone says, the sun is always shining somewhere. We may not see it, but it doesn't mean that it's not there. It may be cloudy, it might be a thunderstorm, but it's still there. So just think about that sun that is shining, and that always gives me hope.
There's going to be a lot of pressure. I'm someone who oftentimes puts pressure on myself. So if you are someone who does that, remember to give yourself grace. Yeah, that's it.
After going around our communities, interviewing teachers, parents, students, and administrators, it was important for us as a branch to sit down together and digest what we had seen and the stories that we had heard.
I think it's very clear from the interviewers, from the interviewees, from students, teachers, superintendents, parents, that it definitely impacts almost every aspect of their life, especially concerning education and the way we look at it, and even down the future, because the superintendent was talking about kids being left behind, and socially, education-wise, everything is being very left behind. So that's definitely going to impact our children in the future. So I would say COVID's impact on the education system is very great, its entirety.
Yeah, Sarah, I totally agree, because we've kind of taken an already, I don't want to say broken, but a system that wasn't created for especially Black youth, and we have made it even more difficult for them to get any kind of edification from it. And that is something that, we as Remember the 400 are working on. I know many activists that we speak to are working on, many educators that we speak to are working on, and we're working on kind of bridging that gap for a lot of Black youth and other youth to kind of get the resources and the education that they need in order to be successful.
Yeah, I think a huge part of what no one really said explicitly, but I think is the undertone of this, is the mental health and the effect of mental health on whether it's students, teachers, or anyone working in a school district, because there's no more connectivity with people. And I think more than the technology problems, which is a problem, and more than the problem with, I'm missing a couple weeks, I think it's also the loneliness, the maybe depression, the even one of the students was talking, I think it was Mia, was talking about how she doesn't do any of the things that she used to do before. And it was, what am I gonna do now? Whether it's building resumes to prepare for college, or whether it's just a social aspect of school that you're missing out on, that's a huge aspect of school, and that affects mental health. Even teachers themselves aren't able to interact with their colleagues. They're just on their computer day by day. The days blend in. And so, yes, I think for that reason, everything is just much more exasperated. One thing that the superintendent did mention was that they do try to put the mental health of their students first before education. I think people don't think about that when thinking about, an education, a person in charge of people's education should put education first, but I think it's really important to put mental health first, as well as making sure people have access to resources such as food and water. One of the things the superintendent said was that they started a meal program, and I do go around schools in the neighborhood, and I see that in signs in front of the school they say, a meal program is happening on a Saturday or a few times a week. And I know in certain areas here, whether it's churches or bookstores, whatever, they have a drive-through meal programs that are available for people. I think a lot of it was also available, at least what I saw, was during the summer months of the beginning of COVID. But I also know that there are branches of Remember the 400 that are helping and assisting with whether it's a canned food drive or going out and serving the community themselves with their physical hands. being safe, but also making sure people have food and water. And I think that's a great thing to do. I think even talking about education, and I love that we're focusing on education, but I think a part of that is making sure people have resources like food and clean water, to make sure that they are able to be educated. And I think putting that first is a good thing to do. And I would love to see what else our individual branches can do in order to help with that as well.
In this pandemic, the education value isn't where it should be because of that lack of interaction that you usually get. So Remember the 400 would come in, and that's where they would improve on, just educating you on your history and stuff like that, which is very important because that could also affect your mentality, your mental health. Because when you don't see yourself in whatever you learn, that kind of detaches you from that, and that makes you not want to be interested, and that leads to you, falling behind, and then it becomes this cycle and the snowball effect that it's hard to get out of. So yeah, remember the 400 is very important in that aspect.
I definitely agree, especially when the curriculum in the schools that we've talked to our people in the communities, we know this is a fact, that in most schools, our Black history isn't taught as the regular curriculum. So of course that adds a level of disengagement. And then add also that it's through a screen now where, you're in your home and not in the classroom. It also adds a different level of disengagement. So there's definitely that aspect of falling behind and not being interested in school, especially the younger, levels, how they could just be like, this isn't important right now. The world's literally falling apart. I don't care about the subject, nor do I care for doing it over the screen. So I could definitely see people being just no, not for me,
I think even the past events that we have are great, but I also think to use our series of talking about education in the time of a pandemic and any other branch that we are, use it as a call to action. So anyone who watches this is able to say, yes, I'm hearing these stories. Yes, I'm hearing these different perspectives. What can I do about it? Whether they are a part of Remember the 400 or not. I think us as an organization can start to be more involved in stuff like providing resources like food and water, but also resources like a mental health workshop or talking to our younger students about what to do when they feel lonely or depressed, or how to interact socially in a pandemic, So I think we can use this as a call to action for Remember the 400 to come up with these things for our community, because yes, we are trying to teach our history, but I think along with that, we have to also allow people to want to engage with these things, to want to engage with education. And like Sarah said, if on top of schools and American society in general not teaching Black history the way it should be taught, the engagement is going to be very low, especially considering the decrease in resources that COVID has brought on, and the stress, whether they have a death in the family or just their family is just in any way affected by COVID. I think that's also going to decrease engagement with that as well. So I think it is important for Remember the 400 and all of our branches to focus on giving different types of resources to their communities, such as food, water, and a mental health resource as well.